so I want to cook restaurant quality steaks at home. In the past half a year, I have cooked well over 200 steaks here in my kitchen, and no, I'm not a professional chef. Through these many repetitions, I have learned the following. Perfecting steak is not complicated. In this video, I want to share with you the process that I use from start to finish. It's also not only one trick that gets you there to that high quality, but it's a series of small steps added on top of each other. Each of these steps is simple on its own, but when you put them together, you consistently produce high quality results. Before I figured out this system through many repetitions, I was not the biggest fan of steak. Myself and my wife, we would occasionally get steaks at the restaurant, but even that was quite rare. We would usually opt out for a burger. Today, we actually prefer to make it at home, where we can get high quality results for a very reasonable price. With this out of the way, let's get started. Today, we are working here with a nice ribeye steak. It's about 500 grams or just under 1 pound. It's one of the most popular meats for home cooks, and I do recommend it as well, as it is quite forgiving, but also has amazing texture, taste, and nice marbling. This one I just brought home from the store, but this doesn't mean that it's necessarily ready for cooking. Now, if you're in a pinch and you need to get the meal ready in a second, sure, you can work with this, but I think we can improve the situation if we follow these simple steps. As I usually plan my meals in advance, I would take this steak out of the packaging, salt it generously, and then put it in the fridge, uncovered, ideally on a wired rack, for at least a couple of hours or even up to 2 days. This process is called dry brining. The salt on the surface draws out the moisture first, then the moisture gets reabsorbed, seasoning the meat more deeply and drying the surface at the same time. The dry surface is what we are after in order to get a nice looking crust. Now, before cooking, I take the steak out of the fridge. Now, the meat is not always going to reach the room temperature, but we want to reduce the temperature gradient in the meat as much as possible. This will allow us to have a more even cook and will reduce the amount of gray band beneath the crust. Assuming you have followed the previous steps, as you are preparing your pan, you should pat your steak very dry as possible. You need to know that there will be still some moisture on the surface of the meat, and that moisture will prevent a nice crust from forming. All of the moisture needs to be evaporated off the surface before the Maillard reaction can take place. Now, since steak and meat altogether is such a big factor for me now that I'm on a carnivore diet, I would like to make a cooking series of cooking steak at home. Today we are covering the fundamentals, but I already have 2 more episodes planned. The second one will be on comparing the pan versus grilling, so barbecue, and the third one is a special episode how to treat premium cuts. Now, these were all steps related to prepping. Now we get into cooking. For cooking, I find the most important part being using the right equipment. For steaks, in my opinion, the only two acceptable ones are stainless steel pan or a cast iron pan. Anything that is non-stick like Teflon pans, don't even bother. It's just a waste of good meat. I don't want to do it, you don't want to do it either. For most nights I'm using stainless steel pan. I find it's super easy to use. You don't need to worry about seasoning, and the result that I'm getting, it's super consistent. Now, the process of cooking, you want to preheat your pan on a medium to low heat. Once it's been going for a couple of minutes, add in the fat. On most nights I'm using beef tallow. You could also go for a neutral flavored high smoke point oil, but I just find that beef tallow works the best. As we are ready to place the steak into the pan, always make sure that you are putting the meat away from you so you don't get yourself splattered with the scorching hot fat. And our goal here is quite simple. We want to nail that nice looking crust, which is the signature of any great steak. In order to do that, we need to maximize the contact between the meat and the surface. You can press down the meat a bit, or ideally, you would use a protein press like I'm doing here. If you don't have a protein press, you can use another pan to weight it down or just leave it like this and hope for the best. Now, I've heard many times that one should flip their steaks often. I don't do that. Especially here on a stainless steel pan, it's simply not possible. Meat will stick to the surface and you cannot move it for a couple of minutes. The best part here is that meat will tell you when it's ready to flip, as it will naturally unstick. So when and only when the meat releases naturally, I will proceed to flipping it. Look at this nice looking crust. It's not perfect yet, but don't worry, we will come back to it once we flip it again. Make sure that you are cooking the steak on the sides as well. Usually there are tougher and fattier parts of the steak here, so you want to render out that fat also. This will greatly improve the flavor and texture. Nobody wants to chew on a raw fat cap. So when is the steak finished? Well, entirely depends on the doneness that you want, and the most reliable way of having that information is using a thermopan. These are super cheap to obtain and they remove any guesswork. Now, on most nights, I will not go ahead and use the thermopan any longer. I have developed this inner timing, but also I can go by feel, figure out whether the steak is already up to my doneness. I like them quite rare anyway, but for most people, I would say using thermopan is the best way forward. It takes a couple of extra seconds and there is no shame on using it. For the sake of this video, I am using the thermal pan and it's currently reading 48 degrees. So I will leave it in for a couple more seconds and then remove it. This is plenty done for me, but for most people, I would advise to take it up to 54 or 56 degrees C. That's that much in the freedom units. And that's because the medium or medium rare version is usually what people prefer. For me, the more steak I eat, the rarer versions I prefer. Once the steak is done, you can take it off the pan and place it on a cutting board, or ideally, we would place it on a wire rack. This would allow for some airflow beneath it as well as the above, and that would preserve our crust. If you do that, make sure that you are using some sort of plate beneath it, as there will be resting juices dripping off your meat. Make sure that you allow your meat to rest for at least a couple of minutes. I usually like to go 5 to 10 minutes. Of course, by resting the steak, the temperature of the meat will drop a bit. And if you don't like your steak cool, you can reheat it before serving it. Now, the final step is slicing the meat. When it comes to slicing, you can go as thick or as thin as you like. For different cuts, I would suggest different thicknesses. But there is one thing that you need to follow always, and that is always cut against the grain. Now, for something like ribeye that we have here, this is quite forgivable. But if you have steaks that have more pronounced and thicker running grains, like skirt, flank steak, and some other cuts that we will cover in future episodes, there you need to be super careful. Cutting it against the grain or with the grain will basically dictate the whole experience. And believe me, you don't want that jaw workout. Now you might have noticed that my steak is only seasoned with the salt. This is what I go for 99% of the time. I'm not using any spices, as well as I'm rarely using any sauce. But this is my personal preference. I like to have that pure taste of meat. But if you want to go for some compound butter or make a pan sauce, this is totally up to you, and it's quite easy to pull together also. So that's it. That's the whole system. There is no complicated tricks or any sort of gimmicks. It's just a bunch of simple steps that are added on top of each other in order to make a perfect, consistent result. These are the exact principles that I have learned as well as refined throughout my 200 steak journey, and I will continue on using them. But what about you? Which steps are you already following? And which one do you want to test next? Let me know in the comments below. As mentioned, in the next episode, we are continuing with the steak series. In that video, we will compare pan cooking versus grilling and see which method is more suitable for different cuts, as well as what are some of the tips one needs to follow when grilling. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm starving now, so I will devour this meat, and you should do the same.